3 years ago, right after I gave birth to my daughter, my husband vanished without a trace. That very same day, while my newborn and I were at our most vulnerable, my mother-in-law kicked us out. For 3 long years, I fought to survive on my own. Today, as my daughter and I waited for the city bus, a luxury sedan pulled up in front of us. "Get in, Nia. I have something important to tell you." It turned out to be my Aunt Celeste, and the secret she carried would change my destiny forever. The strong smell of disinfectant and medicine hit Nia Walker's nose. She opened her eyes slowly. The first thing she saw was the dull white walls of the county hospital room. Her entire body ached as if she'd been shattered into pieces. Every joint throbbed, and the stitches from her C-section pulsed painfully in her belly. But as soon as she turned her head to the side, all the pain seemed to melt away. In a standard hospital bassinet lay a tiny creature wrapped in a pink blanket. Her daughter Zoe had been born safe and sound. Nia reached out. Her slightly swollen fingers touched the small cheek. Warmth immediately spread through her heart. This was a miracle, the fruit of her love with Marcus. Marcus, her husband. Where was he? Since her water broke the night before and a neighbor had rushed her to the hospital, she hadn't been able to reach him. His cell phone was off. Nia tried to calm herself. Marcus was probably busy at the company. That huge project he often talked about must have been consuming all his time. She was sure he would come. She was sure he would be surprised and overjoyed to see his baby girl. Nia picked up the phone from the nightstand. No text messages, no missed calls, just a dark screen reflecting her pale face and slightly messy hair. A cold anxiety began to crawl up her spine, competing with the happiness she had just felt. The nurse told her she could be discharged today. A public facility like this couldn't keep her long. Even though Marcus hadn't come to pick her up, she had to go home. With the strength she had left, Nia packed her small bag. It was only a tiny tote with baby clothes and her change of clothes. Enduring the pain in her belly, she carefully took Zoe into her arms. She paid the administrative fees with her dwindling savings. Marcus hadn't yet given her the monthly allowance for expenses. Nia convinced herself again that her husband was simply too busy. She called a rideshare service. As she entered the address of her in-laws' home, the house where she and Marcus had lived for the past 2 years, her fingers trembled slightly. The drive home felt long and silent. Zoe slept soundly in her arms. Nia looked out the window. Watching the busy streets of Atlanta, she imagined Marcus opening the door, surprising her and Zoe with a warm embrace. She imagined her husband's happy smile. However, when the car pulled up to the large iron gate of the cream-colored house in the Buckhead subdivision, she didn't feel a warm welcome. The house's yard was silent. Marcus's car wasn't in the garage, only his father's, Mr. Henry Thorne's, was impeccably parked. Nia paid the driver and got out. With one hand, she held Zoe, and with the other, she dragged the small bag. She rang the doorbell, once, twice. Footsteps sounded inside. The door opened. It wasn't Marcus. Her mother-in-law, Mrs. Vivian Thorne, stood in the doorway. Her usually stoic face now looked hard and cold. Behind her stood Mr. Thorne with his arms crossed. His gaze was less sharp, but just as distant. "Mother Thorne, Father Thorne, is Marcus here?" Nia asked in a quiet voice, her throat tight. "Why are you looking for Marcus?" Mrs. Thorne snapped. Her words were sharp. Nia was startled. "What do you mean, Mother Thorne? I just gave birth. This is Zoe, our daughter." She tried to show the small face of their first grandchild, hoping to soften the situation, but Mrs. Thorne took a step back as if she'd seen something repulsive. "That child is no longer our business, just like you." Nia's world seemed to stop. "Mother Thorne, what are you talking about? Where is Marcus? I need to talk to him." The pain in her belly worsened. She felt dizzy. "Marcus is gone," Mrs. Thorne yelled. "He has left this house, and it is all your fault. You are a woman who brings misfortune." The accusation was like a hard slap. Tears began to well up in Nia's eyes. "I bring misfortune? I don't know what I've done wrong, Mother Thorne." "Since you married my son, our business started to turn south, and the last straw was last night when Marcus said he couldn't stand living with you anymore." And he left. He left this house. Mrs. Thorne pointed at Nia's face with an index finger that trembled with anger. "That doesn't make any sense," Nia whispered. "Marcus loved me. We were waiting for the birth of this baby. It couldn't be that Marcus had just left." She refused to believe Marcus could have said such terrible things. "Marcus wouldn't abandon me. There must be a misunderstanding. Please let me in. I'm exhausted, Mother Thorne. And Zoe is just a baby." Mr. Thorne finally spoke. His voice was heavy and unemotional. "You haven't heard. You are no longer welcome in this house. Marcus has divorced you. Leave." "Divorce?" Nia stumbled. She had to grab the porch pillar to keep from falling. "When? Marcus didn't say anything. Where are the papers? I haven't signed anything." "You don't need papers. Marcus's word is enough. Now collect your things and leave." Mrs. Thorne suddenly stepped inside and a moment later came back out, dragging Nia's large travel suitcase. Mrs. Thorne opened the suitcase and threw Nia's clothes and the baby's items roughly onto the porch. "Mother Thorne, no!" Nia cried, trying to stop her, but her body was too weak. "Get out! Take that bastard child and get out of here right now!" Mrs. Thorne shoved Nia's body, which was holding Zoe. Nia was pushed back and nearly fell. She held Zoe tightly. The small baby felt the tension and the jolt. She squirmed and broke into a heartbreaking, soul-wrenching cry. "Mother Thorne, please. Mr. Thorne, please. Talk to Mrs. Thorne. I just gave birth. My stitches haven't healed yet. Where am I going to go tonight with a newborn?" Nia pleaded. Her tears now fell in torrents, soaking her simple clothes. She looked at her father-in-law, searching for even a speck of compassion. Mr. Thorne only looked at her coldly. "That is your problem. It is no longer our problem." Mrs. Thorne took Nia's small bag and threw it onto the yard near the open suitcase. "Leave right now before I call security. We don't want to be embarrassed by a daughter-in-law like you." With a shattered heart, Nia had no choice but to obey. She had no strength to confront them. Enduring the extreme pain in her abdomen, she bent down and, holding the baby firmly with one hand, tried to put her clothes and Zoe's back into the suitcase with the other. Mrs. Thorne and Mr. Thorne watched her from the doorway like two satisfied executioners watching their victim suffer. When the suitcase was poorly closed, Nia dragged it toward the gate. She didn't even have the strength to hate. All she felt was emptiness, confusion, and an indescribable ache. She looked back once more, hoping this was all just a nightmare, but the cream-painted door slammed shut. The sound of the deadbolt turning from inside echoed. Nia collapsed on the sidewalk outside the gate. Under the dim light of a street lamp, she hugged Zoe and tried to calm both the child's crying and the crying in her own heart. What had happened? Why had Marcus left? Why had they been so cruel? She was alone in this city with no one. Her parents had passed away a long time ago. She didn't know where her distant relatives were. She looked at the grand house behind the gate. The house, which had been her refuge for 2 years, now felt strange and threatening. Suddenly she heard the sound of the garage door opening. Headlights came on. It was Mr. Thorne's car. Nia scrambled to her feet, hoping they had changed their minds. The car rolled out of the gate and moved slowly forward. Mr. Thorne was at the wheel. His face looked straight ahead. In the passenger seat, Mrs. Thorne sat arrogantly. The car drove right past her. Nia, desperate, tried to turn her face, but in a fraction of a second, her eyes caught movement in the back seat. Her heart seemed to stop. It was Marcus. Her husband was there. Marcus looked directly at her and Zoe in her arms. Their eyes met. Nia wanted to scream his name, but she was frozen. Marcus's face was drained of color, and his eyes showed neither anger nor hatred. What Nia saw was an empty stare full of fear and desperation, as if Marcus was a puppet who couldn't control himself. Marcus immediately turned his head and lowered it deep. The car sped up and disappeared around the street corner, leaving Nia in a dense silence, accompanied only by Zoe's hungry cry and the cold. Now she knew. Marcus hadn't left. Marcus was there, and that vision was far more terrifying than the news of his departure. 3 years was a long time. For Nia, 3 years was the hardest school of life. Since that night's expulsion, she never returned. She never tried to contact Marcus's family again. Marcus's look in the car that night had been answer enough. They were in danger, the in-laws didn't want her, and her husband was too weak to defend her. The first year was the hardest. She used her remaining savings to rent a small room in the south side of Atlanta, a working-class neighborhood, a 10 by 13-foot room that served as a bedroom, kitchen, and playroom for Zoe. The bathroom was shared with other tenants. The walls were thin. At night, Zoe's crying often caused the neighbors to pound on the wall. Nia had no choice but to apologize. As she rubbed the child's back, her heart cried too. She sold the only jewelry she had left, her wedding ring. With that money, she bought formula and necessities for Zoe. She refused to sink into sadness. She had to live for Zoe. She had to be strong. Nia started doing various odd jobs. She accepted small sewing and alteration tasks from neighbors. Her hands, once soft, were now rough and sometimes pricked by needles. When Zoe slept, she sewed late into the night, accompanied by the sound of an old installment-bought sewing machine. When she had time in the mornings, she helped at a kind neighbor's small soul food cafe, Ms. Carroll's. She peeled onions, washed dishes, and did anything that allowed her to earn a few dollars to buy rice and vegetables. The clothes she wore now looked old and faded, but always clean. She was a new Nia, a fighter, a mother. Zoe grew up as a beacon in the darkness. The child was very intelligent and lively. Her face was a perfect combination of Nia and Marcus. Every time Nia looked into Zoe's eyes, she saw strength, but she also saw questions. When she turned 3, Zoe began to ask many things. "Mommy, my friends get picked up by their dad," Zoe said one afternoon while playing with her single rag doll. "Where is Zoe's daddy? Doesn't he want Zoe?" Nia's heart broke. She always had a ready answer for this question. "Daddy went to work far away, honey, to a very distant place to earn money for Zoe." "When is Daddy coming back, Mommy? Daddy doesn't love Zoe." Nia hugged the small body tightly. "Daddy loves Zoe very, very much, and Mommy loves Zoe very much too. When the time is right, Daddy will surely come back." She lied. It was a white lie to protect the child's small heart. She herself didn't know if Marcus would ever return. She didn't even know if Marcus was still alive and well. For 3 years she had fought alone, but there had been no news of her husband, not a single penny for support. That day was exhausting. She had many sewing orders and had to meet deadlines. After bringing materials from the market, she planned to go straight home, but Zoe whined because she wanted to go along. In the end, Nia took her. Now they were standing at a busy bus stop along a large avenue. The afternoon air was hot and full of pollution. Her forehead was wet with sweat. Zoe, tired, started to complain. "Mommy, I'm hot. I want ice cream." Zoe pulled at Nia's clothes and whined. "Just a little longer, honey. The bus will be here soon. We'll buy a cheap popsicle when we get home." Nia patiently comforted her. She rummaged in her pocket and calculated her remaining money. She had enough for the bus ticket and the popsicle. They waited, among millions of tired and hurried people. Nia felt like a small, invisible existence, just one more among the millions struggling in this city. She shifted Zoe onto her shoulder. The child was starting to get sleepy. Suddenly, a very luxurious black sedan stopped right in front of them. The tinted windows were so dark that Nia couldn't see who was inside. It couldn't be that such an expensive car would stop at a bus stop. They must have been confused about the direction, she thought. She moved slightly aside to make way. However, the rear passenger window slowly rolled down. Nia was shocked. Inside the car sat a very elegant, middle-aged woman. The woman wore an expensive business suit jacket. Her face looked familiar, but it took Nia a few seconds to remember her. It was a memory from a past that felt too distant. The woman stared intently at Nia and Zoe with eyes full of surprise, disbelief, and something else. "Nia!" The woman's voice was sharp and full of authority. Nia froze, and her heart pounded quickly. Aunt Celeste. She was her late mother's only sister. Aunt Celeste Dubois. Aunt Celeste, who had lived in Switzerland for over a decade, and whom she had only seen a few times in her life. the Aunt Celeste she had last seen at her mother's funeral years before marrying Marcus. "My goodness, what are you doing here, with this little girl standing by the roadside?" Aunt Celeste's voice rose. Nia didn't know what to say. Her tongue was tied. Aunt Celeste didn't wait for an answer. She opened the car door from the inside. The cold air from the car's AC immediately hit Nia's face. "Get in quickly. Get in with the child," she ordered firmly. Nia hesitated. It was too sudden. She had lived 3 years without anyone, and now her aunt. "But Aunt, Aunt Celeste quickly cut her off. "I just landed. I went straight to your in-laws' old address, but a neighbor there told me you left a long time ago. I've been scouring the city looking for you. Get in, fast. I have to tell you something very important." Aunt Celeste's voice didn't allow rejection. There was a terrifying urgency in her tone. Nia, accustomed to deciding for herself, felt that this time she had to obey. With Zoe in her arms, she got into the luxury car. As soon as the door closed, the noisy sound of the street instantly disappeared. It was replaced by a tense silence. The scent of expensive perfume filled the car. Nia sat on the plush leather seat that contrasted with her simple clothes. Zoe, awakened by the movement, looked at Aunt Celeste with round, curious eyes. The driver in the front seat immediately started the car. Aunt Celeste stared intently at Nia. Her gaze scanned Nia's appearance from top to bottom. The tired face, the faded clothes, the rough hands. "What happened to you, Nia? Where is your husband?" Nia swallowed. She didn't know where to begin. "It's a long story, Aunt." "Then make it short. But that is not the important thing now," Aunt Celeste said quickly. She took a deep breath. Her angry face now looked serious. "Very serious. There is something I must inform you of immediately. It's a very important matter." Nia waited. Her heart beat even faster. Aunt Celeste looked directly into her eyes. "It's a story about your father and your mother." It had been a long time since she had heard those 2 names from someone else's mouth. Father and mother. 2 names she always missed in silence. Hearing those names in this serious situation gave Nia goosebumps. "Is it something bad, Aunt? Something I don't know?" Nia whispered. "Did something happen to them, Aunt? They died a long time ago." "That is true," Aunt Celeste said. Her voice softened slightly. "But there is something they left you, something you didn't know, something that has been the reason I have returned to Atlanta now." The luxury sedan drove through the city traffic, but inside it was quiet and well soundproofed. Nia was still trying to comprehend Aunt Celeste's last words, her father and mother. She remembered them as simple, hard-working parents who died in a tragic car accident when she had just entered college. They had left her alone. She thought they had only left her a small house on the city outskirts, that house she later sold to pay her college tuition and the initial funds for her marriage to Marcus. She had no idea there was anything more. "Aunt, I don't understand," Nia said quietly. Zoe felt her mother's anxiety and sat silently in her lap, looking at Aunt Celeste with round eyes. Aunt Celeste sighed deeply. Her firm face softened as she looked at Zoe, but hardened again as she looked at Nia. "Of course you don't understand. All of that was part of your father's plan. Your father and mother, Nia, they were not ordinary people. They were extremely successful entrepreneurs. They were very wealthy." Nia shook her head. "That doesn't make any sense. We lived simply. Our house was small and Mom never wore flashy jewelry. Dad only had an old truck." "That was a cover-up, Nia," Aunt Celeste explained. "Your father built a real estate and export business from the ground up. Both of them worked hard, but they were afraid that if you grew up amid luxury, you would become a spoiled child. More than that, they were afraid that you would become a target for bad people who only wanted your fortune. That's why they raised you austerely, so you would grow up as an independent, strong woman." Tears began to well up in Nia's eyes. The faces of her father and mother, smiling genuinely, flashed through her mind. She hadn't even realized their sacrifice. Aunt Celeste continued, When they died in the accident, I was the only close family they trusted. I had just moved to Switzerland to manage the foreign branch of the business. In their will, they left everything to you, but there was a condition. Nia's heart skipped a beat. What condition? Your father was very astute. He knew you were still young and vulnerable after their passing. He was afraid you would meet the wrong man who would try to take advantage of you, so he left a clause. Aunt Celeste leaned forward. All their assets, Nia, millions of dollars, perhaps billions if we calculate now, were frozen and held in a trust fund, and I was designated as the trustee, the only person who could manage it. Then when can I receive it? That is the condition, Aunt Celeste said. The will stipulated that the fund could only be withdrawn and fully transferred to you, the sole heir, after two conditions were met. First, that you legally married. Second, that you had a child. Nia gasped. Marriage, child, Marcus, Zoe. All the pieces of the puzzle began to form a terrible picture. Why those conditions? Nia asked quietly. Because your father thought that if you married and had a child, you would have your own family and be a mature adult. He thought you would have someone to protect and would use that fortune more wisely. Isn't it ironic? Aunt Celeste smiled bitterly. Your father's good intentions became the loophole that the devils exploited. The car entered a luxury apartment complex in the Druid Hills neighborhood. The driver seemed to already know the destination. Now listen to the most important part, Aunt Celeste continued. Her voice turned cold. My management period ends the moment your daughter, the secondary heir, turns 3 years old. That's why I scheduled my return to Atlanta today. I planned to surprise you by transferring everything as a birthday gift for Zoe, but a month ago, I received something that made me rush everything. What is it, Aunt? 1 month after you gave birth to Zoe, Aunt Celeste looked directly at Nia. Right at the time they kicked you out of that house, I received an urgent fund withdrawal request from the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. The request was submitted by your husband, Marcus, and his father, Mr. Henry Thorne. Nia covered her mouth. They didn't know I was the principal administrator. They thought I was just an overseas manager and that the local bank would process it. They attached a power of attorney with your forged signature and included a fake medical report from a psychiatrist stating that you were suffering from severe postpartum depression. They alleged that you were mentally unstable, not in your right mind, and incapable of managing the fortune. Nia's body went cold. So that was the reason. They threw her out and made her look like a runaway lunatic so they could seize control of everything under the excuse of caring for the heir, Zoe. They accused me of being crazy, Nia whispered in horror. They tried to usurp your rights. They tried to rob you and your daughter. Aunt Celeste was furious. Of course, I blocked that attempt immediately. I contacted lawyers here. They failed completely instantly. They couldn't touch a dime of your parents' main legacy. All of that is safe with me. Then why did they kick me out if they failed? Because they panicked, Aunt Celeste answered. They may have managed to steal your other money, your personal savings, or anything else they could get their hands on. But with the main fortune, they failed. They were afraid you would find out. They were afraid that one day you would realize and claim your rights. That's why they abandoned you. They hoped you would destroy yourself on the streets. They hoped you would slowly die. And then they thought they could later forge your death certificate and try again. Nia's tears now fell nonstop. They weren't tears of sadness, but of fire, a burning anger. For 3 years she had lived in poverty. For 3 years she had worked hard. For 3 years she had endured hunger so Zoe could drink milk. For 3 years she had assured Zoe that her dad had gone to work far away. Meanwhile, her daughter's father and his entire family tried to destroy her and steal her child's future. Aunt Celeste put her arm around Nia's shoulders. That's enough. Don't cry anymore. Your tears are too precious to give to those bastards. Starting today, you will no longer suffer. She looked at Nia sharply. They don't know I'm back. They don't know I've found you. They think you're already destroyed. Tomorrow, Nia, we will go to the bank. We will activate all your assets. And after that, Aunt Celeste smiled chillingly. "We are going to reclaim your parents' house, the one I've been told they are illegally occupying." Nia wiped her tears. She looked at her reflection in the dark car window, the face of a tired fighter. Her clothes might have been faded, but her eyes now burned. "No, Aunt. We'll do more than reclaim it. We'll make them pay." The house was large, much bigger than the one Marcus and Nia had lived in. It was located in a rather exclusive subdivision, although not as luxurious as Aunt Celeste's area. In the living room, decorated with expensive leather sofas and a large flat-screen TV, a legal drama about estate disputes was playing, but no one was watching it. The atmosphere in the room was far from comfortable. The ashtray on the table was full of cigarette butts. Mrs. Thorne paced anxiously back and forth. Her face looked older than it was. Living 3 years in this superficial luxury seemed to have consumed her soul. "Our money is dwindling," Mrs. Thorne finally snapped, stopping in front of her husband, Mr. Thorne, who was reading, or pretending to read, the newspaper. Mr. Thorne slowly lowered the newspaper. He put his glasses on the table. "I know, Vivian. I already told you the new business I started needs time." "Time? We don't have time," Mrs. Thorne shouted. "There's still a mortgage on this house and the car. And the savings from that Nia and the money we got from selling our old house are almost gone. I don't want to live poor again, Henry." 3 years ago, after completely failing to obtain Nia's main inheritance, they panicked. They took everything they could. Nia and Marcus's joint savings, wedding gifts. They even sold their old house, which had originally been partly bought with Nia's money. They used that cash for the down payment on this new house and started a life of luxury, but their lifestyle far exceeded their income. "All of this is your son's fault," Mrs. Thorne glared at Marcus, who was sitting rigidly in a corner of the room. Marcus flinched. For 3 years he had lived like a shadow in his own house. He worked at his father's startup, but he didn't have a fixed salary. He only received an allowance like a small child. His body was thin, his eyes sunken, and his face always looked anxious. "My fault?" Marcus asked quietly. "Yes, yours," Mrs. Thorne lashed out. "If you had been smarter, if you had convinced Nia to sign that power of attorney before giving birth, if you hadn't been so weak, we wouldn't have had to invent the story about her being crazy." "Enough, Vivian. It was everyone's plan." Mr. Thorne tried to mediate in an unconvincing voice. "Our plan was your plan, Henry. You said that inheritance was easy money. You said that the deceased's sister, that Celeste, wouldn't care. What's the reality? She blocked everything. We got nothing but the crumbs." Mrs. Thorne became more hysterical. Mr. Thorne rubbed his temples. The headache wasn't just from his wife's screaming. He had bad news that he had been hiding for 2 days. There was a bigger problem. "Vivian, what's wrong now?" Mr. Thorne looked at his wife. "Celeste. Aunt Celeste is back in Atlanta." Mrs. Thorne immediately stumbled. Her face paled. "How do you know?" "My contact at the bank told me. 2 days ago, she came asking about the status of the trust fund. She is starting the withdrawal process." "Withdrawal?" Mrs. Thorne panicked. "How is that possible?" "Because of the conditions, obviously," Mr. Thorne interrupted, frustrated. "That Nia's daughter, that Zoe, must have turned 3 years old already. According to the terms of the will, Celeste has returned to hand everything over to Nia." "Nia?" Mrs. Thorne laughed scornfully, but her voice trembled. "How is that woman going to hand it over to Nia? That girl has been missing for 3 years. She's probably died as a homeless person on the street." "That is precisely the problem," Mr. Thorne said. "If they don't find Nia, Celeste, as the trust administrator, could take control of everything. Or worse yet, she will look for Nia. She will hire detectives. And if she finds Nia..." The atmosphere sank into silence. Everyone knew what that meant. If Aunt Celeste found Nia and told her everything, they were finished. Forgery of documents, attempted fraud, theft. They could go to jail. Suddenly Marcus, who had been quiet until then, began to laugh. It was a dry, creepy laugh. "What is wrong with you, Marcus?" Mrs. Thorne yelled, scared. Marcus lifted his head. His eyes were red and bloodshot. "So all of this has been for nothing?" What do you mean? 3 years! Marcus suddenly stood up and threw a glass from the table to the floor, shattering it. Mrs. Thorne and Mr. Thorne were startled. It was the first time Marcus had lost control. For 3 years I have lived like a walking dead man in this house. I have obeyed all your demands, Mother. I abandoned my wife. I abandoned my newborn daughter. His voice trembled violently. Watch your mouth, Marcus. All of that was for you, Mrs. Thorne retorted. For me! Marcus shouted louder. What good has it done me to live in fear every day? You said that if we threw Naya out and took the money, our lives would be peaceful. You said that when the situation calmed down, I could bring Naya back, but it was all a lie. Marcus pointed at his mother's face. That night, the night you threw Nia out, I was at the hospital. I saw Zoe. I held Zoe, Mother. I cried with happiness. She was so tiny and beautiful. And you and Dad came. You dragged me home. You said Nia wasn't in her right mind. You took my phone. You said she brought misfortune. The shadows of that night flashed again. The night Nia stood on the street with Zoe in her arms, looking at their car with broken eyes. I saw her, Mother, Marcus sobbed. His body collapsed to the floor. I saw Nia on the street. You and Dad prevented me from getting out of the car. You locked me in. You said it was the only way. You said she would be okay. She really is a woman who brings misfortune, Mrs. Thorne whispered. But now there was fear in her eyes, seeing her son's state. No, she isn't. Marcus pounded the floor. It's us. We are the ones who bring misfortune. I am a failed husband. I am a wicked father. I don't even know if they are still alive. Mr. Thorne tried to approach his son. Calm down, Marcus, calm down. We will find a way. There is no way out, Marcus howled. I have nightmares every night. I see Zoe's face. I see Nia's eyes. I shouldn't have listened to you. I should have run away with her that night. Mrs. Thorne tried to slap Marcus to make him snap out of it, but her hand stopped in the air. Ding-dong! The sound of the doorbell shattered the tense silence. All 3 people in the room froze. Their hearts seemed to stop. They looked at each other with terror. Visitors didn't come unannounced. Ding-dong! The doorbell rang again, more determined, more impatient. Mrs. Thorne swallowed hard. Mr. Thorne was rigid, and Marcus, still on the floor, looked at the door with a gaze that contained the greatest fear of his life. They knew that something they had dreaded for 3 years had finally arrived. Aunt Celeste's apartment was located high up in a downtown skyscraper. This wasn't just a simple dwelling, it was a palace above the clouds. The floor was imported marble. The furniture was minimalist, but looked very expensive, and the glass walls offered a panoramic view of nighttime Atlanta. For Naya, who had grown accustomed to thin plywood walls and leaking ceilings for the past 3 years, this felt like another dimension. Only her daughter, Zoe, didn't feel uncomfortable. The little one immediately ran across the thick velvet carpet, laughing joyfully, as if she were born for this luxury. Aunt Celeste asked her assistant to bring a change of clothes for Zoe, hot food, and toys. Nia finally took a hot shower, washing away the street dust and the sweat of exhaustion. She put on simple but clean, new clothes that had been prepared for her. Her old clothes were replaced by new ones. When she came out of the bathroom, she saw Zoe had fallen into a deep sleep on the huge sofa, hugging a new teddy bear bigger than her body. Nia sat across from Aunt Celeste. On the glass table between them were hot tea and some snacks, but Nia couldn't touch them. Her stomach was still churning, not from hunger, but from the reality that had just hit her. So they thought I was crazy, Nia repeated quietly. That was their plan. Aunt Celeste sipped her tea. Her face was calm, but her eyes hinted at controlled anger. They thought it was the easiest way. With that fake medical report, they could apply to be Zoe's guardians. And as Zoe's guardians, they thought they could control your entire inheritance. An evil plan, but very stupid. Stupid? Nia asked. They managed to kick me out. They almost succeeded. No, Aunt Celeste shook her head. They never could have succeeded even without me. That's the part I haven't told you yet. That's your mother's intelligence. Nia frowned. What do you mean, Aunt? Aunt Celeste leaned forward. Your father built this kingdom, but your mother protected it. Your mother knew your father was too straight-laced. Your mother always had a premonition. She designed the security system for your inheritance. Mr. Thorne and Mrs. Thorne only knew the superficial information. They knew there was money and that the conditions were marriage and a child, but they didn't know the key. The key to that inheritance cannot be withdrawn only with a power of attorney or guardianship, Aunt Celeste explained. To activate that trust fund, 3 separate keys are needed. The first key is me, the principal administrator. My consent is absolutely necessary. That's why their attempt failed immediately. Aunt Celeste continued. The second key is your fingerprint, biometric verification at the Federal Reserve Bank, something they cannot fake. That's why they needed that insanity report. They hope to forcibly take you to the bank, but even that is not enough, because there is a third key, the most important key, the final key that only I, your father, your mother, and you know. Naya was confused. I don't know anything, Aunt. Aunt Celeste smiled faintly. You still wear the green jade pendant your mother gave you. Nia unconsciously touched her chest. Under her clothes hung a necklace with a tear-shaped jade pendant. She had never taken it off. Even when she was struggling, when she sold her wedding ring, she didn't even think about selling this pendant. It was the last memento she received from her mother, given just before she died. To her, its sentimental value was priceless. Always, Nia whispered. I've never taken it off. Take it out and look closely under the light. Nia took out the necklace, bringing it closer to the bright table lamp. The jade was dark green, and the feel in her hand was cold. She turned it over. There was nothing strange. Look at the pointed part at the bottom, Aunt Celeste indicated. There is a very, very fine engraving. Nia squinted. It was true. Something was engraved on the end of the pendant. They weren't letters or numbers. It was a complex pattern, so small that it couldn't be seen clearly with the naked eye. That's not a simple necklace, Nia, Aunt Celeste said. It's a seal. Inside it has a very long alphanumeric code engraved with a microlaser. That is the master account number for your entire trust fund. Without that code, the bank cannot process anything, even with my consent. That was the absolute proof of your ownership, something that has always been attached to your body, something that Marcus and your in-laws considered a worthless trinket. Nia looked at the necklace in her hand. Her tears began to fall. This time they weren't tears of sadness, but of overwhelming emotion. Her mother. Her mother was protecting her from beyond the grave. For 3 years she had navigated poverty. For 3 years she had gone hungry, but hanging from her neck was the key to unimaginable wealth. It was ironic, but now she understood. Her mother wasn't punishing her. She was protecting her, guarding that inheritance until she was ready, and until her enemies showed their true colors. They didn't know, Nia whispered, squeezing the necklace hard. They didn't know, Aunt Celeste confirmed. They were busy forging your signature. Meanwhile, what they needed was hanging from your neck every day, right in front of their noses. They were so greedy they didn't see it. Nia wiped her tears. Her grip on the necklace grew stronger. A warm sensation spread throughout her body. This was no longer a simple memento. This was a weapon. This was a testament. Tomorrow, Aunt Celeste said. Her voice became firm again. We will start everything. In the morning, we will go to the bank. We will activate the fund. I have already arranged an appointment with the chief executive officer. We will transfer all assets completely into your name. And after that, Aunt Celeste smiled sarcastically, we will pay a visit to your parents' house, the house they are now living in. Nia nodded. Her face, pale a moment ago, was now flushed. A new energy flowed within her, energy of anger, but also of justice. You need to rest tonight, Nia. Sleep well. You and Zoe are safe here. Starting tomorrow, your life will change, and you need to be mentally prepared. This is no longer about survival, but about reclaiming your rights. Aunt Celeste stood up and walked toward the large bedroom. She opened the doors of a very large closet. Inside, it was full of new clothes, elegant dresses, blazers, and women's suits. Several kinds of silk scarves hung neatly. "I've prepared it. I don't know your exact size, but I've bought several outfits," Aunt Celeste said. "Tomorrow you will not meet them as the Nia who was kicked out, but as the new Nia, the legitimate owner of everything they are enjoying." Nia looked at the clothes. She looked at her reflection in the large mirror in the room, a woman in old clothes and tired eyes. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, her gaze was already different. It was no longer the look of a victim. It was the look of a queen about to reclaim her throne. "I'm ready, Aunt," she said. Her voice no longer trembled. "I am very prepared." Almost simultaneously, in the large house that had belonged to Nia's parents, they finally answered the doorbell. With his heart in his throat, Mr. Thorne walked toward the door with trembling steps. Mrs. Thorne followed behind him. Marcus, still sitting on the floor among the broken glass, stared at the door with an empty gaze. Mr. Thorne opened the door. In front of him was not the police, nor Aunt Celeste. There was only a uniformed messenger who handed him a large brown envelope with the logo of a famous law firm. "Is this you, Mr. Thorne?" the messenger asked expressionlessly. "Yes, it's me," Mr. Thorne replied. "Sign here, please." Mr. Thorne signed with a shaky hand. The messenger nodded briefly and left. Mr. Thorne looked at the envelope as if it contained a time bomb. "Who is it from?" Mrs. Thorne whispered anxiously. Mr. Thorne ripped the envelope open abruptly. He pulled out a thick sheet of paper with official letterhead. Reading the first line, his eyes widened. "It's a notice of a lawsuit." His voice was choked. "What notice?" Mrs. Thorne shouted. Mr. Thorne read in a trembling voice. "In relation to the illegal occupation of the property located at 1 Eagle Street, registered in the name of the late Mr. and Mrs. Walker, given that the inheritance rights have fully reverted to the sole heir, Ms. Nia Walker." Mr. Thorne couldn't continue. The paper fell from his hands and fluttered to the floor. "Nia," Mrs. Thorne whispered, her face pale. "So that woman, Celeste, has found her. They know we are here." "They are demanding that we vacate this house in 48 hours, Mr. Thorne continued. His voice now sounded as if he were being strangled. "Or they will take legal action for trespassing, forgery, and attempted fraud. We have to go. We have to run, Vivian, right now." Mrs. Thorne started to panic. Her eyes darted around, looking for valuables to take. "Where are we going to run, Vivian?" Mr. Thorne shouted, frustrated. "All our remaining assets are at the bank. If they tracked this house, they've tracked our accounts. They've blocked us. We have nothing." Marcus's laughter was heard again. This time it was a desperate laugh. "It's over," he said quietly. "Our game is over." Mrs. Thorne looked at Marcus with fury. "This is all your fault, because you were weak." "Why don't you shut up?" Mr. Thorne shouted. His anger exploded. "Blaming him doesn't help us. Now we have to think." But they no longer had time to think. They spent that night terrified. Mrs. Thorne cried. Mr. Thorne paced back and forth all night making calls, but his cheap lawyer didn't answer. They were isolated. Marcus simply sat in his room waiting for the end. The next day, around 11 in the morning, the most luxurious black sedan they had ever seen stopped right in front of their gate. Marcus, spying from his second-floor bedroom window, felt breathless. The car door opened. The first to step out was a woman he knew very well, Aunt Celeste, elegant as always, with a glacial look. Then, 2 men in expensive black suits who looked like movie lawyers, and finally the rear door opened. A woman stepped out. She wore an ivory blazer and wide-legged trousers that fit her perfectly. A mocha silk scarf wrapped perfectly around her neck. Her face, previously pale and tired, was now covered with light but decisive makeup. Her beautiful eyes were hidden behind expensive black sunglasses as she stared intently at the house. Marcus staggered backward. He felt a squeeze in his heart. It was Nia. It was his wife, but she was no longer his Nia. She was a stranger, beautiful, authoritative, and terrifying. Downstairs, the doorbell rang, just like the night before, but this time it sounded like the bells of doom. Mrs. Thorne and Mr. Thorne froze in the living room. They already knew who had come. "Open the door, Henry," Mrs. Thorne whispered in a trembling voice. Mr. Thorne, with the pride he had left, walked to the door and opened it. The sight in front of him left him paralyzed. Nia stood between Aunt Celeste and the two lawyers. Nia slowly removed her sunglasses. Her eyes looked directly into Mr. Thorne's. There was no fear or sadness, only a cold emptiness. Mrs. Thorne, seeing that her husband didn't say anything, immediately stepped forward. It was her only weapon, to act. "Nia!" she cried, trying to shed fake tears. "My goodness, daughter, where have you been? Your father and I have missed you so much. We've looked everywhere. We were so worried." Mrs. Thorne opened her arms to hug her lost daughter-in-law. Nia didn't move. She raised a hand, palm forward, stopping Mrs. Thorne instantly. "Enough with the theatrics, Mrs. Thorne." Nia's voice was calm and monotonous, but it resonated with a new strength, clear and concise. "I am not your daughter, and I know you didn't look for me." Mrs. Thorne froze. Her arms hung awkwardly in the air. Her performance had completely failed. "I have come to take back what is mine," Nia continued, "starting with my parents' house." At that moment, Marcus appeared on the staircase behind them, his eyes fixed on Nia. "Nia!" His name sounded like a painful prayer. Nia finally turned her head toward him. She looked at the man she once loved with all her heart, the man who was her daughter's father, the man who abandoned her at her most vulnerable moment. She scanned Marcus up and down, a thin, disheveled, and broken man. One of the lawyers stepped forward, taking control of the situation. He handed a stack of official documents to Mr. Thorne's hand. "Good morning," the lawyer said in a professional voice. "I am the legal representative for Ms. Nia Walker, the legitimate owner of this property. It seems you didn't take seriously the notice of a lawsuit we sent last night. We have an official eviction order from the court, a writ of asset seizure, and all the evidence of the crimes you have committed: forgery of documents, attempted fraud, and trespassing." The lawyer looked at his wristwatch. "Our client is still being kind. You have two options. You pack your bags in 24 hours and vacate this house. You return the car keys and all the credit cards you have used illegally. Second," the lawyer's voice rose, "we will call the police, who are now waiting at the end of the street, to arrest all three of you. Choose." Mr. Thorne's face turned gray. The choice the lawyer presented was not a choice, but an ultimatum. On one side was immediate ruin, on the other, delayed ruin. 24 hours. His hands holding the documents trembled violently. He looked at Mrs. Thorne for support, but his wife was equally shattered. Mrs. Thorne's face, pale a moment ago, turned red with shame and explosive anger. "You can't do this!" Mrs. Thorne shouted. Her voice rose loudly. "This is our house! We bought it! You scammed us!" The second lawyer, a woman who seemed calm but firm, stepped forward. "Mrs. Thorne, I advise you to remain silent. We have already secured all the evidence of your purchase. You purchased it with money illegally drawn from my client and your son's joint account the day after my client was expelled. We have the record. Everything you say now will only aggravate the criminal charges against you." The explanation immediately silenced Mrs. Thorne. She staggered backward as if she had just been struck. Nia watched the scene with a chilled heart. She had imagined this scene 1,000 times over the past 3 years. She thought she would feel satisfaction, but all she felt was emptiness. Their ruin did not give her back her 3 years of suffering. Marcus, who was rigid on the staircase, finally moved. He descended slowly, walking past his parents paralyzed in the doorway. He approached Nia. Each step felt heavy. He stopped 3 feet away in front of Nia. His face was a mask of pain. His eyes, once bright, were now clouded and filled with regret. "Nia." His voice was hoarse, almost inaudible. "I'm sorry." Nia looked him directly in the eyes. They were the same eyes as Zoe's, but in Marcus's eyes, she could no longer see love, only weakness. "You're sorry?" Nia asked. Her voice was still calm, but the cold penetrated to the bone. For what, Marcus? For pretending to love me, for my inheritance? For conspiring with your parents? For allowing me to be accused of being crazy? Or for letting your daughter, your own flesh and blood, sleep on the floor of a cold room for 3 years? All of Nia's questions were daggers piercing Marcus's heart. He shook his head weakly. No, it wasn't like that, Nia. I loved you. I truly loved you, my love. Nia laughed cynically, a silent laugh that sounded like a gasp. Your love wasn't seen when your mother threw me out. Your love wasn't felt when I had to choose between buying milk for Zoe or my own dinner. Your love wasn't there. I had no choice, Marcus cried, his voice cracked. They threatened me. They locked me up. Nia raised her hand, a signal to stop as she had done with Mrs. Thorne. I don't want to hear this here. She turned to Aunt Celeste and the lawyers. Aunt, would you give us 5 minutes alone? Aunt Celeste looked at her niece. She saw a new strength in her. She nodded. 5 minutes. We'll wait on the porch. Don't let him touch you. He won't dare, Nia replied. Aunt Celeste and the lawyers went out. Mr. Thorne and Mrs. Thorne, knowing the situation was out of control, retreated to the living room. They collapsed onto their expensive leather sofas. They looked like 2 puppets whose strings had been cut. The front door remained open. Nia entered the house that was once her parents'. It smelled of new carpet and expensive furniture. But to Nia, this house smelled of betrayal. She stopped in the living room. Marcus followed her like a shadow. Speak now, Nia said without turning her head. Marcus stood behind her. The distance was short, but it felt like there was an unbridgeable abyss. Silence enveloped them. Only Marcus's repressed sobs could be heard. That night, Marcus began. His voice trembled. The night Zoe was born, I went to the hospital. I didn't disappear. Mother called me and I went. I saw you were still sleeping. I saw Zoe in the bassinet. I held her, Nia. Now Marcus's tears fell in torrents. I had never been so happy in my life. She was so small and beautiful. I kissed her. I swore I would protect you and her. Nia closed her eyes. Hearing this pained her heart. The small part of her that still loved this man was hurt. And then, Marcus continued, Mother and Father arrived. They dragged me out. They said there was a big problem at the office. They took me home. I said I had to wait for you to wake up, but Mother got angry. She told me I was useless. When we got home, they took my phone. They said... Marcus's voice choked. They said the plan had failed, that your Aunt Celeste had blocked everything. They panicked. They said the only way was to make you look unstable. They said you already knew about the inheritance and were planning to run away with Zoe. And you believed them? Nia asked coldly, finally turning to face Marcus. Not at first, Marcus quickly replied. I got angry. I shouted. I tried to go back to the hospital, but Dad held me down. They locked me in the room. They said it was for my own good. They said you were influenced by Aunt Celeste. They said you would leave me after getting all that fortune. So you chose to believe them over your wife, Nia concluded bitterly. I didn't know who to believe, Marcus sobbed. I was confused. I was scared. Mother said if I didn't listen to them, they would be ruined. Dad said he would go to jail for the debts. Mother said we just had to keep you safe for a while. She said that when the money was released, they would let me bring you and Zoe back. They said we would live happily. Happiness built upon my suffering, Nia whispered. I know I was wrong. Marcus suddenly fell to his knees. He reached for Nia's hand, but she quickly withdrew it. Marcus prostrated himself on the floor, grabbing the edge of Nia's clothing. That night, the night you were thrown out, I was in that car. It was me. His voice was muffled against the marble floor. I saw you on the street with Zoe. It had just stopped raining. You looked so broken. I wanted to rush out. I wanted to hold you. But Mother held me down. Dad locked the car doors. They said it was part of the show. They said their employees would come and pick you up and take you somewhere safe. But no one came to pick me up, Nia said icily. I waited there for hours until I realized no one would come. I know. Marcus lifted his face, wet with tears and snot. The next day I knew they had lied. I went crazy, but it was too late. They said they didn't know where you were. For 3 years, Nia. For 3 years I've lived in hell. I couldn't ask about you. Every time I mentioned your name or Zoe's, Mother threatened to commit suicide. I became their puppet. I was weak. I was a coward. I am the worst husband in the world." He looked at her with deep, pleading eyes. "But please, Nia, give me one more chance. Not for me, but for Zoe. She needs a father. I will do anything. I will testify against my parents. I will give you the divorce if you want, but let me see Zoe. Let me apologize to her." Again, silence enveloped the room. Nia looked at the man prostrated at her feet, the man who had broken her trust. His confession was sincere, and his pain was real, but that was not enough. "Get up, Marcus," Nia ordered. Marcus slowly stood up. He stood in front of Nia, awaiting her sentence. "You're right. You were weak, and you were a coward," Nia said calmly but firmly. "And your weakness was a choice. You chose your parents over your family. You chose the inheritance over your love. Your confession changes nothing." "Nia, please, let's talk about Zoe." Nia cut him off. "She needs a father, but she doesn't need a father like you. She needs a strong father who protects her, not a father who sacrifices her for his own fears. For 3 years I have been both mother and father to her, and we have done well." "You can't be so cruel, Nia." "Cruel?" Nia took a step forward and her eyes burned. "You want to talk about cruelty? Cruelty is leaving your newborn to freeze on the street. Cruelty is accusing your wife of being insane. Cruelty is living in this fake luxury, knowing your daughter might be starving outside. Don't talk to me about cruelty, Marcus." Marcus fell silent. He was defeated. Nia walked past him toward the door. "My lawyer gave you 2 options. Now I personally give you a 3rd option. You can stay with your parents and sink with them, or—" Nia stopped at the threshold. "You can admit everything legally. Testify against them for all their crimes. That won't make me come back to you. That won't make you see Zoe." "Then what's the point?" Marcus asked desperately. Nia slightly turned her head. "It will be the only proof that there was even a speck of goodness in you, your only redemption. Think about it." Nia walked out of that house and returned to the porch under the bright sun. She felt as if she had come out of a tomb. She took a deep breath. Aunt Celeste looked at her with concern. Nia nodded. "It's over." She looked at the lawyers. "They have 24 hours. If they are still here after that, call the police. We will seize everything." Then she walked toward the car, descending the porch stairs without looking back. She didn't need to see Marcus collapsing and crying silently behind the door. She didn't need to see Mrs. Thorne screaming hysterically or Mr. Thorne staring blankly at the wall. That chapter was over. The game was won. The 24 hours passed quickly for Nia, but they felt like an eternity for the Thorne family. They didn't sleep. Mrs. Thorne spent the night packing fake jewelry and fake designer bags while continuing to curse Nia and Aunt Celeste. Mr. Thorne desperately tried to contact his connections, but the rumor of their downfall seemed to have spread faster than wildfire. No bank wanted to lend him money, and no friend answered his calls. They were isolated. Marcus locked himself in his room after the conversation with Nia. He didn't come out, didn't eat, and didn't speak. He simply sat staring at the wall, repeating Nia's every word: weakness, coward, choice. The next day, at exactly 11 o'clock, Nia didn't return. She didn't have to. Who came was Aunt Celeste's team of lawyers, accompanied by a court officer and several security guards. They came with a moving truck. Mrs. Thorne tried to fight. She stood in the doorway with her arms wide open. "This is my house! You can't come in! Get out, all of you!" Aunt Celeste's lead lawyer only showed the court order with the official seal. "By force or voluntarily, ma'am, we are coming in. If you obstruct the court officer, we will proceed with your arrest for obstruction of justice." Upon hearing the word arrest, Mrs. Thorne's courage shrank. Trembling with rage, she had no choice but to step aside. When the operators began to enter, they worked quickly and professionally. They inventoried the valuables that were confirmed to have been purchased with Nia's money: the leather sofa, the flat-screen TV, the double-door refrigerator. Everything was taken outside. "No, that's mine! I bought it!" Mrs. Thorne screamed, trying to stop an operator moving a large porcelain vase from the corner of the room. "I'm sorry, ma'am. According to the records of the frozen credit cards, this vase was purchased using a card in your son's name with funds originating from my client's account," the lawyer said calmly. The ruin happened systematically. In 3 hours, the house was empty. Only their clothes, piled up in their old travel suitcases, remained. The neighbors in the luxury subdivision watched and whispered from behind their windows. The spectacle of a rich family suddenly becoming poor was interesting entertainment. Their reputation was completely destroyed. Mr. Thorne sat on the floor of the now empty living room. His face looked like it had aged 10 years in one night. He had lost everything: house, business, and dignity. "Let's get out of here, honey," Mrs. Thorne whispered, her voice hoarse from crying and shouting. "Where are we going?" Mr. Thorne asked, his gaze lost. "We have nothing." At that moment, Marcus came down from the upstairs. He carried a small backpack. His eyes were swollen, but a glimmer of determination was visible on his face, something his parents had never seen. "Marcus, let's go, son. Let's get out of here. We'll start over," Mrs. Thorne said, trying to grab her son. Marcus pulled his mother's hand away. "No, Mother, there is no us anymore." He walked past his two parents. "Where are you going, Marcus?" Mr. Thorne asked in a trembling voice. Marcus stopped for a moment at the threshold. "I'm going to the precinct to atone for my sins." Mrs. Thorne's eyes widened with terror. "What? Are you crazy? Are you going to send your parents to jail?" Marcus turned his head. "My parents locked me in guilt for 3 years. Nia was right. This is the only path." "Ungrateful son!" Mrs. Thorne yelled, trying to chase after him. But Marcus was already out. He walked past the seizure truck, past the neighbor's stairs, walking out of the subdivision without looking back. Mrs. Thorne collapsed on the porch. She cried inconsolably. Her son, the only child she was proud of, had left her. She had sacrificed everything for him, but now her own son was going to destroy her. Their downfall didn't stop there. Marcus's confession was the final nail in the coffin for Mrs. Thorne and Mr. Thorne. With Marcus's testimony added to Aunt Celeste's compelling evidence, the forged power of attorney, the bank recordings, the fake psychiatric report, the case was very easy for Nia's team. The legal process moved quickly. Nia didn't need to attend. Everything was handled by Aunt Celeste and her team. Mrs. Thorne and Mr. Thorne tried to hire lawyers, but no competent lawyer wanted to defend an already lost case without upfront fees. They were found guilty of all charges: fraud, forgery of documents, conspiracy to appropriate assets, money laundering. The news made it into some financial media outlets. Mr. Thorne's reputation, already shattered, completely disappeared. In court, Mrs. Thorne, who had already lost her sanity, tried to attack the prosecutor's table. "It's all lies, it's defamation. The crazy one is Nia, she set us up." The judge pounded the gavel hard. "Calm down." Nia, watching the sentencing on television from Aunt Celeste's apartment far away, stared at the screen without any expression. Beside her, Zoe was absorbed in drawing, unaware that the drama was ongoing. "You don't look happy," Aunt Celeste said, handing Nia a juice. Nia turned off the television. "I'm not happy, Aunt, but I'm relieved. It's over." "They got what they deserved," Aunt Celeste said. "And Marcus?" Nia asked quietly. "He testified completely," Aunt Celeste replied. "His lawyer said that due to his cooperation, the sentence would be much lighter, probably a few years of probation or community service. He won't go to jail like his parents." Nia nodded. She didn't know what to feel about Marcus. She no longer hated him. All that remained was pity. Then she stood up and walked toward the balcony. She looked at the city stretching out below. 3 years ago, she was one of those tiny dots struggling on the streets down there. Now she saw everything from above. She had returned. She had not only recovered her fortune, but also her life. The day of the sentencing reading was overcast, as if the Atlanta sky sensed the tension hanging over the courthouse. The courtroom was full of people. On one side, seats for the general public and the press. The story of the fight over a multi-million-dollar inheritance with accusations of insanity against the heir had become tasty fodder for the media. On the other side sat the defendants, Mrs. Thorne, Mr. Thorne, and Marcus. Nia decided to come. Aunt Celeste advised her not to attend. Why dirty your eyes and ears with their drama? But Nia insisted. This was not about revenge, but closure. She needed to see with her own eyes that this chapter had truly ended. She needed to hear the sound of the judge's gavel coming down as a sign that justice had been served. She left Zoe with Aunt Celeste and a new nanny, telling her daughter she had to go to work for a moment. Accompanied only by a lead lawyer, she sat in the first row, right behind the prosecutor's table. Today her scarf was dark gray, matching a simple but dignified suit. She sat upright with her back straight. She didn't look back to where Marcus and his parents were sitting, but she could feel their gazes. She could feel the hatred emanating from Mrs. Thorne, the desperation from Mr. Thorne, and the look full of regret from Marcus. The trial began. The prosecutor read the charges, detailing all the evidence of their crimes, the forged power of attorney, the attempted fraud against a financial institution, the malicious conspiracy, the fake medical report, the usurpation of assets, the embezzlement. The list was long. Each point read was a nail in their legal coffin. Mrs. Thorne continued to babble unintelligibly, murmuring that this was all defamation. Mr. Thorne simply lowered his head deeply. His face, once arrogant, was now emaciated and empty. He had lost everything, and now only expected to spend the rest of his life behind bars. Marcus, sitting a little apart, seemed resigned. His lawyer made the best plea, highlighting his role as a cooperative key witness, helping to expose his parents' crimes. He admitted everything voluntarily, without coercion. Finally, the court read the sentence. The voice of the presiding judge was heavy and firm. After deliberation, the sentence is pronounced. Defendant 1, Mr. Henry Thorne, and Defendant 2, Mrs. Vivian Thorne, are found legally guilty of the crimes of malicious conspiracy, forgery of documents, and attempted fraud. Nia's heart pounded hard. Defendant 1, Mr. Henry Thorne, is sentenced to 12 years in prison, and Defendant 2, Mrs. Vivian Thorne, is sentenced to 15 years in prison. 15 years? No! Mrs. Thorne's scream broke the silence of the room. She jumped up with frenzied eyes. It's unfair. The judge has taken money from that woman. The crazy one isn't her. She's a defamer. She has ruined my family. You will be miserable. You and your daughter will be miserable. My curse will never leave you. Security guards immediately grabbed Mrs. Thorne, who was struggling. She pointed her finger at Nia, who was sitting quietly. You are a demon in clothes. You are an ungrateful daughter-in-law. You ruined my family. Nia only looked at her. Curse. Was there any heavier curse than the one she had already suffered? The woman in front of her had already lost her mind. Beside her, Mr. Thorne didn't react. When the 12-year sentence was pronounced, he simply closed his eyes, accepting his fate. Then the judge moved on to Marcus. Next, regarding Defendant 3. Marcus Thorne, considering his status as a cooperative accomplice, that is, a collaborator who has confessed and helped expose the crimes, the court decides to impose a penalty of 3 years in prison. Marcus's heart sank. 3 years. However, said penalty does not require fulfillment in a penitentiary center. It is replaced by 5 years of supervised probation and the obligation to perform 1,000 hours of community service at a designated orphanage. The gavel came down. Nia sighed deeply. It was over. The sentence had been passed. Whatever the form of justice, Mrs. Thorne was dragged out while still screaming and insulting. Mr. Thorne walked staggering, as if his soul had been torn from his body. Marcus remained frozen in his chair, even after the judge left. He was free, but he was not free. He had lost everything: honor, family, and the woman he loved. Nia stood up. She didn't want to stay there long. She wanted to go home quickly and hug Zoe, to cleanse herself of the negative atmosphere of this place. She walked out into the courthouse hallway. Her lawyer followed, protecting her from some journalists trying to take photos. "Nia!" A voice she knew very well called her. Nia stopped in the crowded courthouse hallway. She turned. Marcus was running toward her. His face was wet with tears. 2 officers watched him but didn't stop him. "Nia, wait!" Marcus pleaded, gasping. Nia looked at him. She waited. "Thank you," Marcus whispered. Nia frowned. "For what?" "For this probation. Your lawyer surely asked for my sentence to be lightened. You must have asked for it. Thank you." Nia shook her head slowly. "I didn't ask for anything, Marcus. I only asked for justice. Your sentence is the result of your own choice to finally tell the truth. That is a redemption that comes from you, not from me." "But Nia—" Marcus moved closer. He looked very broken. "After this, can I see Zoe, even once? Just 5 minutes. I just want to see her." This was the question Nia knew would come, the question she most feared and for which she had most prepared. She looked at Marcus. She saw the same man who knelt at her feet in that house, the man who pleaded. "No, Marcus," Nia replied in a voice that was soft but firm as steel. "Why?" Marcus sobbed. "She is my daughter too. I have already received my punishment. I have lost everything. Why are you so harsh?" "It's not a matter of harshness. It's about her," Nia said. "Zoe is 3 years old now. For the first 3 years of her life, she didn't have a father. For the first 3 years of her life, all she knew was a mother fighting for her. Now her life has just begun. She is happy. She is safe. I will not allow anything or anyone that has the potential to harm her happiness. And you, Marcus, you are a wound. I can heal that wound. I will be a good father." "You can't," Nia cut him off. "You can't be a good father now. You have to heal yourself for the next 5 years. Focus on your sentence. Focus on community service. Learn to be a person of integrity first. Learn not to be weak." Marcus fell silent. Nia's words hit him harder than the judge's sentence. "Then when?" Marcus whispered desperately. "When will I be able to see her?" Nia looked down the long hallway stretching before her. She took a breath. "Perhaps someday, when Zoe is old enough to understand, when she asks about you and I can tell her everything about you, including the truth that her father finally chose to do the right thing, then I will allow her to decide for herself if she wants to meet you or not. That is her right." Marcus lowered his head. He understood. That was the fairest answer he could hope for. Nia turned. "I have to go. Zoe misses me." "Nia." Marcus called her one more time. Nia stopped, but didn't look back. I will always love you and wait eternally." Nia closed her eyes for a moment. "Your love is too high a price for me, Marcus. Goodbye." She walked out. This time, she didn't stop. She walked past the group of journalists, past the glass doors of the courthouse, and stepped into the sunlight. For some reason, that sunlight felt warmer now. She didn't look back to see Marcus, who stood alone, crying silently, leaning against the hallway wall. At the end of the street, she heard the sirens of the police van carrying Mrs. Thorne and Mr. Thorne to their destination. The price of betrayal had been paid. 2 years have passed since that day. Nia's parents' large house on 1 Eagle Street has now completely changed. The dull cream walls have been replaced by an elegant ivory color. The garden, once dry, is now lush with roses and jasmine flowers. In the afternoons, the laughter of a child is often heard in the backyard. The house no longer harbors the aura of betrayal. It has become a home filled with warmth, love, and new hope. Nia, now almost 30, has completely transformed. She is now the chief executive officer of the real estate and export company she inherited from her father. She not only took control of the company, but rebuilt it from the wreckage and has now grown it even further. Today she presides over the board of directors. In a room full of middle-aged men who look at her with respect, Nia stands at the front, presenting the business expansion plan to the European market. A dark blue silk scarf wraps around her calm and confident face. She speaks concisely, clearly, and sharply. She knows all the data and answers all questions with irrefutable logic. She is no longer the weak woman kicked out of the house. She is a leader. Aunt Celeste, sitting on the board as the principal advisor, looks at her niece with pride. She knows that Nia has exceeded her expectations. She not only inherited the fortune, but also the intelligence and strength of her parents. She is known as a fair leader. The experience of living through difficulties for 3 years has made her deeply value the efforts of others. She ensures that all employees have adequate pay, good health insurance, and a respectful work environment. She remembers well what it feels like to work hard without recognition. She did not allow wealth to change her. She is still Nia, simple in her attitude, but strong in her principles. After the meeting, amid applause, Nia returned to her spacious office. She took off her blazer, remaining only in the simple blouse underneath. She looked at the photo frame on her desk, a photo of her laughing with Zoe in her arms at the park. Next to it was a photo of her late father and mother. Nia smiled. "Father, Mother, I hope you are proud," she whispered. That afternoon she left work on time, no overtime for her. The time after 5 o'clock belonged entirely to Zoe. She arrived home at the same time as Zoe's school bus. "Mommy!" A beautiful, cheerful 5-year-old girl ran out of the gate and immediately hugged Nia's legs. "Hi, honey." Nia laughed and lifted the small body into her arms. "How was school today?" "Zoe got 5 stars, Mommy. Zoe knows how to draw a rainbow," Zoe bragged. "My smart girl." Nia kissed her daughter's cheek. They walked hand in hand to the backyard. Aunt Celeste was waiting with hot tea and cookies. They spent the rest of the afternoon with laughter and stories. Zoe never asked about her dad again. Her world was complete. She had Mommy, she had Grandma Celeste, as Zoe called Aunt Celeste, and she had plenty of love. Elsewhere in the same city, in a suffocating jail, a very different scene unfolded. In a narrow cell, Mrs. Thorne and Mr. Thorne ate the prison food. Mrs. Thorne's hair was already white, and her face was full of wrinkles of hatred. "This is all your fault," Mrs. Thorne whispered to her husband. "If you hadn't been so greedy." "Enough, Vivian, shut up!" Mr. Thorne, now thinner and quieter, simply looked at the rice on his plate. "We're going to be here a long time. Blaming someone doesn't change anything." "I won't shut up. This is all because of that woman. Someday I will get revenge." Mr. Thorne sighed. His wife would never change. They were trapped not only by the prison walls, but by their own hatred. That was their true karma. And in another corner of the city, in a small, busy coffee shop, a thin man in a flannel shirt wiped a table. It was Marcus. After finishing his probation period, he refused to return to the business world. He chose a simple life away from the spotlight. He worked as a manager at this small coffee shop. He rented a modest boarding house room. His life was now filled with work, prayer, and spending the rest of his days in silence, accepting the destiny of having lost the most precious thing in his life. His atonement was carried out in silence. That day, a customer left an economy magazine on the table. Marcus picked it up to throw it away, his eyes fixed on the cover. The photo of Nia smiled with a mix of pain and admiration. "You did it, Nia," he whispered. He folded the magazine and returned to work, continuing with his simple life. Back in the garden on Eagle Street, the sun began to set, staining the sky with beautiful orange and purple colors. Nia pushed the swing for Zoe. "Higher, Mommy, higher!" Zoe laughed. Nia smiled and pushed the swing. She looked at her daughter, her source of strength. She looked at her peaceful home. She looked at the sunset sky. 3 years ago, at the same time, she was standing at a bus stop, desperate and exhausted. Now she stood in her own garden as a victor. Her life wasn't perfect. She was a single mother with a dark past, but she was complete. She was strong. She found her happiness not in a man or in wealth, but within herself, in her love for her daughter, and in her ability to rise from ruin. A new dawn had arrived for Nia and Zoe, and this time there wasn't a single cloud in the sky. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day, and now 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.